what you might call the new intolerance, a new but intense desire to gag uncomfortable voices of dissent. The best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it.
In this video, we are going to cover a brilliant speech from Rowan Atkinson from 2014, where he's campaigning to get the word insulting removed from a public order act, which would have essentially made it illegal to insult anybody. And along with this, just to really drive the message home, I'm going to contrast Rowan Atkinson's speech with another very famous comedian celebrity that you will certainly know. A celebrity that decided to not go down the free speech route. So with that, let's get into the clips.
My starting point when it comes to the consideration of any issue relating to free speech is my passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely. The most precious thing in life, I think, is food in your mouth. And the third most precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself. That is because I have enjoyed free expression in this country all my professional life and fully expect to continue to do so. Personally, I suspect highly unlikely to be arrested for whatever laws exist to contain free expression because of the undoubtedly privileged position that is afforded to those of a high public profile. So my concerns are less for myself and more for those more vulnerable because of their lower profile. Like the man arrested in Oxford for calling a police horse gay, or the teenager arrested for calling the Church of Scientology a cult, or the cafe owner arrested for displaying passages from the Bible on a TV screen. When I heard of some of these more ludicrous offences and charges, I remembered that I had been here before in a fictional context. I once did a show called Not the 9 O'Clock News some years ago, and we did a sketch where Griff Rhys-Jones played Constable Savage, a manifestly racist police officer to whom I, as his station commander, is giving a dressing down for arresting a black man on a whole string of ridiculous, trumped-up and ludicrous charges. The charges for which Constable Savage arrested Mr. Winston Kadogo of 55 Mercer Road were these: walking on the cracks in the pavement, walking in a loud shirt in a built-up area during the hours of darkness, and one of my favorites, walking around all over the place. He was also arrested for urinating in a public convenience and looking at me in a funny way. Who would have thought that we would end up with a law that would allow life to imitate art so exactly? I read somewhere a defender of the status quo claiming that the fact that the gay horse case was dropped after the arrested man refused to pay the fine, and that the Scientology case was also dropped at some point during the court process, was proof that the law was working well, ignoring the fact that the only reason these cases were dropped was because of the publicity that they had attracted. The police sensed that ridicule was just around the corner and withdrew their actions. But what about the thousands of other cases that did not enjoy the oxygen of publicity, that weren't quite ludicrous enough to attract media attention? Even for those actions that were withdrawn, people were arrested, questioned, taken to court, and then released. You know, that isn't a law working properly. That is censoriousness of the most intimidating kind, guaranteed to have, as Lord Dear says, a chilling effect on free expression and free protest.
Now, for those of you who grew up watching Mr. Bean like I did, it's always a little bit of a shock to see Rowan Atkinson speaking with such grace and eloquence. But nevertheless, it's chilling to hear this and to look back at this considering where we're at today. And before we get to Rowan Atkinson dropping some essential wisdom, let's have a look at where we are at today, because I don't think many people realize just how critical this situation is. Incrementally, we have been slowly moving towards a world where it is more and more acceptable to deny people their rights to freedom of speech and expression. If you said 20 years ago some of the things that we're seeing today, you would have been laughed out of the room. I mean, most Western countries nowadays don't even have free speech or expression anymore. According to the Times, more than 3,300 people were detained and questioned last year, being 2016, over so-called trolling on social media and other online forums. A rise of nearly 50% in 2 years, according to figures obtained by the Times. 3,300 people arrested for speech in a country that has crime going through the roof. Furthermore, a few months ago, there was a woman arrested in the UK for standing outside of an abortion clinic and silently praying in her head.
Are you praying? I might be praying in my head. Okay, well then you're under arrest.
Just a few days ago, there was a preacher arrested in the States for standing at a pride rally and reciting Bible passages.
God is not. That's it. God, this will be brother. And they're clapping. Brothers, man.
I cannot believe I'm watching this.
And in Australia, during the pandemic, not like we had it anyway, but we threw free speech straight in the bin. People were getting arrested for social media posts.
Yeah, she's pregnant, so...
Take it easy.
What's this about?
But I have an ultrasound
Just let me
in an
finish.
hour.
Let me finish and I'll explain. It's in relation to a Facebook post, in relation to a lockdown protest you put on for Saturday.
Yeah, and I wasn't breaking any laws by doing
You
that.
are actually, you are breaking all. That's why I'm arresting you in relation to
In
insult.
front
How
of
can
my
you arrest
children,
her?
In
That's-
front of my 2 children.
Can't you just say to her, take the post down? Like, come on.
Journalists were getting arrested for dissenting against the government's narrative.
I've got my national media press card, which is issued, the accreditation issued by the federal government. So right now, a journalist is being physically removed from doing his job, from reporting on the streets of Melbourne. Guys, it's against my will. You can see here I'm getting forced and pushed in the van.
And just recently, a comedian named Isaac Butterfield, or the Buttsman, is being hauled into court over offensive jokes that he made on stage. And these are just a few examples that don't even begin to scratch the surface. And then you look at organizations like the ADL or the Anti-Defamation League. They're a World Economic Forum puppet organization that say that they're there to fight anti-Semitism. But you just go a little bit further and you realize that they're working with the best tech companies in the world to combat online harassment, racism, and extremist disinformation. Yeah, right. We all know what that means. The director CEO of the ADL is a guy named Jonathan Greenblatt, who is one of Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum agenda contributors. And now, on the topic of the ADL, here's a celebrity who's taken a slightly different path. This is a speech that Sacha Baron Cohen gave, accepting an International Leadership Award from the ADL. But before we do that, guys, make sure you've chucked a like on the video and subscribed to the channel. It only takes you a few seconds and it helps me because YouTube is forced to push my content out to more and more people.
A sewer of bigotry and vile conspiracy theories that threaten our democracy and to some degree our planet. This can't possibly be what the creators of the internet had in mind. I believe that it's time for a fundamental rethink of social media and how it spreads hate, conspiracies, and lies. There is such a thing as objective truth. Facts do exist. And if these internet companies really want to make a difference, they should hire enough monitors to actually monitor. Work closely with groups like the ADL and the NAACP, insist on facts, and purge these lies and conspiracies from their platforms. When discussing the difficulty of removing content, Mark Zuckerberg asked, where do you draw the line? Yes, drawing the line can be difficult. But here's what he's really saying. Removing more of these lies and conspiracies is just too expensive. These are the richest companies in the world, and they have the best engineers in the world. They could fix these problems if they wanted to. Twitter could deploy an algorithm to remove more white supremacist hate speech, but they have reportedly haven't because it would eject some very prominent politicians from their platform. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. So here's a good standard and practice. Facebook. Start fact-checking political ads before you run them. Stop micro-targeted lies immediately. And when the ads are false, give back the money and don't publish them. At times, some critics have said my comedy risks reinforcing old stereotypes.
Shalom?
Attack! Attack the Jew!
No, he's not a tank.
Throw the Jew down the well, so my country can be free.
The truth is, I've been passionate about challenging bigotry and intolerance throughout my life. As a teenager in England, I marched against the fascist National Front and to abolish apartheid. As an undergraduate, I traveled around America and wrote my thesis about the civil rights movement with the help of the archives of the ADL. And as a comedian, I've tried to use my characters to get people to let down their guard and reveal what they actually believe, including their own prejudice. I admit there was nothing particularly enlightening about me as Borat from Kazakhstan, the first fake news journalist, running through a conference of mortgage brokers while I was completely naked. But when Borat was able to get an entire bar in Arizona to sing, "Throw the Jew down the well,"
So my country can be free.
it did reveal people's indifference to anti-Semitism. When, as Bruno, the gay fashion reporter from Austria, I started kissing a man in a cage fight in Arkansas, nearly starting a riot, it showed the violent potential of homophobia.
So just let me get your logic straight here, Sasha. You created a character that is a flamboyantly gay German man, turned every single gay stereotype up to 110, and then went to an MMA show in America and started doing everything but have actual in the ring in order to expose homophobia. Okay, Sacha Baron Cohen, gotcha. You see, guys, everybody will have their moments of truth in life, and there are two different kinds of people that react two different kinds of way. The first one, in this case, will say, I'm a comedian, I stand by what I've done, and I support everybody's right to freedom of expression. And then there's the type that say, no, please, don't cancel me. I'll do or say anything that you want. It's them you want, not me. Take them. And this is what I like to refer to as cutting the rope. You've climbed to the top of the mountain, you've gotten up there, enjoyed the view, shaken hands with Klaus Schwab and the ADL, and then just cut the rope and let everybody else fall behind you. You've essentially taken the money and run without any regard to the future of comedy and creativity. And that's why everything he's done in the last few years has flopped. And that's all I can really say about that, because what I just said actually could get my channel taken down, because that's how much power these people have over what we say on the internet. But luckily, ladies and gentlemen, amongst these spineless jellyfish, there are men with brass balls like Rowan Atkinson. And he is about to tell us the perfect remedy that was relevant back then and is still relevant now and will be relevant for the rest of time.
Parliament's Joint Committee on Human Rights summarised, as you may know, this whole issue very well by saying, while arresting a protester for using threatening or abusive speech may, depending on the circumstances, be a proportionate response, we do not think that language or behaviour that is merely insulting should ever be criminalised in this way. The clear problem with the outlawing of insult is that too many things can be interpreted as such. Criticism is easily construed as insult by certain parties. Ridicule easily construed as insult. Sarcasm, unfavourable comparison, merely stating an alternative point of view to the orthodoxy can be interpreted as insult. And because so many things can be interpreted as insult, it is hardly surprising that so many things have been, as the examples I talked about earlier show. Although the law under discussion has been on the statute book for over 25 years, it is indicative of a culture that has taken hold of the programs of successive governments, that with the reasonable and well-intentioned ambition to contain obnoxious elements in society, has created a society of an extraordinarily authoritarian and controlling nature. That is what you might call the new intolerance, a new but intense desire to gag uncomfortable voices of dissent. I am not intolerant, say many people, say many softly spoken, highly educated, liberal-minded people. I'm only intolerant of intolerance. And people tend to nod sagely and say, oh yes, wise words, wise words. And yet if you think about this supposedly inarguable statement for longer than 5 seconds, you realize that all it is advocating is the replacement of one kind of intolerance with another, which to me doesn't represent any kind of progress at all. Underlying prejudices, injustices, or resentments are not addressed by arresting people. They are addressed by the issues being aired, argued, and dealt with, preferably outside the legal process. For me, the best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it. As with childhood diseases, you can better resist those germs to which you have been exposed. We need to build our immunity to taking offense so that we can deal with the issues that perfectly justified criticism can raise. Our priority should be to deal with the message, not the messenger. As President Obama said in an address to the United Nations only a month or so ago, laudable efforts to restrict speech can become a tool to silence critics or oppress minorities. The strongest weapon against hateful speech is not repression, it is more speech. And that's the essence of my thesis, more speech. If we want a robust society, we need more robust dialogue, and that must include the right to insult or to offend. And even if, as Lord Dear says, the freedom to be inoffensive is no freedom at all.
The antidote to bad ideas is more speech and better ideas. Rowan Atkinson is a man that has made a career off of being able to have freedom of expression and being able to push boundaries. Mr. Bean is one of the most genius shows ever created. Imagine creating a comedy show where you can't say a word. Just imagine the level of creativity is absolutely genius. But moreover, the man has character and has stayed true and loyal to his craft and is fighting for the next generation of comedians to enjoy the same freedoms as he did. So with that, I hope that message resonated with you guys. And if you guys haven't checked out my other channels, hit that link in the bio. And also, if you want to watch another video, click right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.